Cleetus McFarland has returned to NASCAR. And the fact that Cleetus was turned down for Talladega is a far bigger problem than it seems since. Only a few days ago, the entire topic of discussion surrounding him was whether NASCAR had essentially instructed him to slow down, go back, and prove more. Suddenly, he has secured the start of another O'Reilly Auto Parts series, another chance to race with Richard Childress, and a fresh chance to completely turn the story around. We will thus examine how the Talladega approval debate erupted today, why the argument got far more heated than a single driver being turned down, the way Cleetus really did in the race that caused people to start thinking differently about him, why Kyle Petty's response was more significant than most people think. The major reveal, his spectacular comeback at Nashville Superspeedway, will follow, what he said about it, and what we ought to anticipate from him going forward. Let's briefly set the scene first. Garrett Mitchell, whose real name is Cleetus McFarland, is not some random online man who chose to race NASCAR out of the blue. With millions of followers, years of experience producing motorsports video, and enough crossover appeal to make the sport take notice whenever he appears, he is one of the largest automotive creators in the nation. That's precisely why the rejection of Talladega turned into such a controversy. On the one hand, NASCAR approached the matter as a governing body ought to do. According to Steve O'Donnell, the approval process is essentially race by race, and even though Cleetus is very well liked, these drivers are still the best in the world, and NASCAR needs to make sure the appropriate individuals are out there. To put it another way, the sanctioning authority did not say never. Not yet, they said. To be fair, that followed his O'Reilly debut at Rockingham, where he finished 30 seconds, 6 laps behind, in an exciting maiden start that featured a full spin and close calls. NASCAR's perspective was straightforward. Superspeedways are a different animal, and Talladega is not the place to master the fundamentals of racing these vehicles in traffic. However, many fans did not approach the story in a clinical manner, which is why it became so popular. They took an emotional look at it. They saw a man who attracts attention, who obviously enjoys the sport, who is eager to put himself out there, and who, in their opinion, was being held to a standard that felt particularly harsh because his errors were being closely examined. And the Cleetus debate actually exists there. The question is whether the sport should advance him a bit more quickly because of what he brings to the table, rather than whether he has stopped developing, which is obviously not the case. Underneath all of this, there is a quiet argument. Since NASCAR is assessing more than just lap times, I can understand why some people feel that way. Risk, publicity, credibility, fan growth, and the message it conveys to others attempting to climb the ladder are all being considered. This is why it has never been a straightforward yes or no situation. Opportunity and development are at odds with one another. When he clarified that there is a thin line separating the entertainment aspect from the sport itself, John Prost essentially said that. This is where the atmosphere began to change. Rockingham was the race that significantly altered the discourse. No, it wasn't ostentatious. No, the run was not a miracle. No one is acting as though P32 is a superstar outcome. However, the nature of that race made it significant. It was a test of survival. It was a test of discipline. And just getting through that level without wrecking the automobile or killing a lot of people was not insignificant for a guy entering it under a huge spotlight. The story was further complicated by the fact that he placed fourth in the ARCA East race at Rockingham that same day. Therefore, even while the O'Reilly outcome appeared unappealing on paper, the weekend as a whole revealed a more intriguing tale. He was capable of driving and adapting, and he wasn't totally over his skis in every circumstance that detractors thought he would be. Kyle Petty had been among the more vocal skeptics prior to the race, which is why his response was noteworthy. He has publicly questioned the implications for NASCAR if someone with little conventional expertise could climb the ranks primarily due to popularity. He essentially made the case that NASCAR is a professional sport, that it is elite, and that the process should not be replaced by a fan base. Then there was Rockingham, and then Petty's tone shifted. He stated, "If you're going to criticize, you've got to give credit." Cleetus did what he needed to do. He did not tear anything up and did not really get in anybody's way, the statement continued, and that it was sufficient to silence men like myself. That is a significant statement since it indicates that the criticism did not go away but rather changed. It changed from, "Why is he here?" to, "Okay, maybe there's something workable here." And that kind of change is important in NASCAR. Respect is hard to come by in this sport, especially to outsiders. Actually, it doesn't. I disbelieve him if a seasoned voice like Kyle Petty is prepared to admit it. And now I have to admit what he did. This indicates that the discussion has progressed. It has shifted, perhaps not completely, perhaps not permanently. Cleetus himself contributed to the change in tone. His response after being rocked was essentially appropriate. He made no attempt to oversell it. He didn't behave as though he had won the series. He acknowledged that the race had mistreated him. In essence, the message was, I got my butt kicked, but I finished. Since people can detect phony confidence from a distance, that kind of honesty actually works well in stock car racing. Next was Kansas. This is significant because, despite the title story's focus on Nashville's return and Talladega's rejection, Kansas subtly fueled the proletariat side of the debate. Before the engine failed, he was in the top 10 of the ARCA race. When the motor failed on 3, it was stated that he was in 10th place. Motorsport observed that prior to the issue getting worse, he had risen from 25th on the grid to 8th. People won't remember that outcome in the end. However, it is undoubtedly the type of mid-race speed that athletes are aware of. In fact, his response to that setback summed up his entire season. He sounded encouraged rather than crushed. Because he completed more than 75% of the distance, had a great time, and recognized the top 10 pace as evidence that he is headed in the right way, he declared the performance a victory. This is significant because, once more, the discussion over approval is all about advancement. It is literally race by race, according to NASCAR. Therefore, Kansas handed him some if the sport were seeking advancement. This return tale is more powerful now than it would have been a week or two ago because of this. Nashville would have seemed like a consolation prize if it had been announced right after Talladega's rejection. Nashville, however, seems more like the next phase of a real plan now that Rockingham is out of sight and Kansas was moving faster before the engine catastrophe. And a small favor before I make that revelation. Please hit like, share, and subscribe to NASCAR Central if you like this kind of NASCAR analysis. We have slightly more than 4,000 subscribers. We are making a lot of effort to promote this channel. Let's aim for 100 likes on this one. It significantly increases the number of NASCAR fans who see these videos. As part of his 3-race contract with RCR for 2026, Cleetus McFarland will make his formal comeback to the NASCAR O'Reilly Auto Parts Series at Nashville Superspeedway on May 30th. He will be driving the number 33 Tommy's Express Richard Childress race vehicle. That was verified in several sources on April 20th and 21st. Additionally, RCR publicly promoted the message using a straightforward one. He has returned. Additionally, I like that Cleetus did not make an announcement like someone who believes he has already succeeded. He made the announcement as if he knew just what this start meant. He stated that he will be spending a lot of time in the simulator and doing a lot of training with RCR. He is eager to get back in the vehicle, but he still needs to practice turning left. In actuality, that tone is appropriate. It is not haughty, but it is enthusiastic. It states that he is aware that this is not a victory lap for making it through the Talladega rejection, but rather another test. And Nashville is an intriguing location for this. It's not Talladega. It's not a soft landing, but it's also not the kind of draft and commotion that worries NASCAR about younger drivers. The similar point was raised in a number of reports around the announcement. Nashville is still a challenging track, and it won't be simple for someone who doesn't know anything about this series. The learning curve shifts once again, as one outlet even referred to it as his first intermediate-type difficulty at this level. What can we anticipate from him there, then? I believe that a headline finish is not a reasonable expectation. Compared to Rockingham, it is a more orderly, calm, and deliberate race. It's a successful day if he can maintain the car's straight line, avoid problems, control the track's lengthy green flag rhythm, and demonstrate improved comfort throughout the entire distance. Because each lap at Nashville is essentially a step closer to the more significant question that still looms over him. When and under what circumstances? Will NASCAR approve the superspeedways at last? This is a huge return because of that. Not because Talladega is smaller than Nashville. It's not. Rejection typically halts momentum, which makes it enormous. In Cleetus McFarland's situation, it somehow increased pressure, attention, and the possibility of a more significant comeback. The narrative survived the denial. Nashville is now the next checkpoint in front of the entire NASCAR world because it sharpened the story. The fact that those involved in the sport obviously do not want this to fail is another factor supporting him. For some time now, that has been clear. The door hasn't been shut by NASCAR. RCR has been steadfast. Steve O'Donnell presented this as a step forward rather than a penalty. According to John Prost, they respect Cleetus' contributions to the sport and admire him. Even the tone of criticism from individuals such as Kyle Petty has changed from dismissive to more sincere. Prove it to me. Compared to a situation where the garage has written you off, that is a very different setting. And if I'm being completely honest, that's probably the most accurate way to assess Cleetus' current situation. He hasn't gained the trust of everyone. Not every critic has been silenced by him. Hype alone isn't getting him through. However, he has done enough to preserve the chance. That's important because many drivers who don't pay attention would have left the conversation by now. Cleetus didn't. He continued to show up, made quick progress, kept people talking, and now he has another chance with the best squad. That is not insignificant. It's a true opening. This is the main point. The setback was Talladega's denial. The first reality check came from Rockingham. Nashville is the next true test, and Kansas served as a subdued reminder that there is real pace there. This story becomes even more compelling if he goes there and runs calmly. The naysayers will have more ammunition if he suffers. In any case, the sport continues to keep a close eye on him, making Cleetus McFarland one of NASCAR's most intriguing crossover stories at the moment. That concludes the update. For Talladega, Cleetus McFarland was turned down. He took the hit, continued racing, began persuading some people, and is now returning to the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series in Nashville with another opportunity to demonstrate that this is more than just a viral side story. I don't think you can dispute this anymore, regardless of how you feel about the experiment. People pay notice each time he gets into one of these vehicles. Please subscribe to NASCAR Central, like the video, and spread the word if you want to see more daily NASCAR stories like this one. One racial narrative at a time, we are constructing this channel. And let me know in the comments whether you believe Nashville is the race that will ultimately demonstrate Cleetus McFarland's suitability for greater NASCAR prospects. Do you still believe that the sport is justified in requiring him to earn every inch of this ascent?